Welcome to Bear and Balanced. I'm Jeff Berckes, a writer for Windy City Gridiron, and I'm joined by the boss at Windy City Gridiron, Lester A. Wiltfong Jr. Lester, did the Bears just dominate a game, or did they finally get their return on the Micah Glennon contract? Like, what happened yesterday?
That was an interesting game, to say the least. What is that? That's 2 in a row. So if they win one more, that's called a winning streak. I think the old
one
quote.
more,
So,
it's a streak, right?
Yeah. So yeah, it's they have a chance with the Vikings next week. So I mean, this game, I don't think we expected a blowout, but when we saw it was going to be Mike Glennon, come on, I think we all kind of had an idea that's going to be a rough game for the Giants.
So 29-3, the Bears pick up another victory. Eddie Jackson had another touchdown taken away from him. He had it in his hands. I don't really understand why they didn't give him credit for that, but it is what it is. Poor Eddie Jackson continues with his bad luck streak. Interesting game. A lot of fun stuff on defense. Bears got 14 points right out of the gate, and then just had this big lead the whole game, right? I mean, they just 29-3. I mean, they just never really let it go. Those are fun when you don't have any stress. I mean, I know that both teams are bad, but it was kind of fun. And it was kind of fun to see the terribleness that is Mike Glennon in Soldier Field in an opponent's uniform.
You know, before the game, Olin Kreutz tweeted out a picture of the fabled turnover bucket. You know, and there was a question about, where has this been? And I guess the Bears and Trevis Gipson and Robert Quinn and Tayshaun Gibson, Deion Bush. I mean, they made sure to put the turnover bucket back in use this week.
Well, let's get into some of that stuff. So I think a lot of really good play by the lines this week. So let's get into Trent's tribute as we always do. You're starting off this week. Why don't we start off with new Bears royalty?
Yeah, I wanted to start this off with Robert Quinn. I mean, 18 sacks. That breaks Richard Dent's team record, obviously, of 17.5. That was set back way back in 1984. But besides that sack, he had a tackle, 2 quarterback hits. He had a forced fumble. We've talked about him all year. He's been a revelation. He has been, we figured when Mac left, he wouldn't be doing as much as he was because they'd spent a little more time on him. But I'm not seeing him get chipped very often. A lot of it is he wins with speed. He wins so fast. There's no chance for anyone to come help. So if the chip is there, that's fine. But he's just, he has been a total package this year, and he now leads the league in sacks. He has 100 sacks on his career. I saw some people on social media suggest that maybe now you trade him because his in the offseason. I'm not sure if that's even going to be a possibility because of his age, because of his contract. Let's just enjoy him. I mean, if he does this again next year, that's great. Let's just enjoy Robert Quinn, his late season surge, and it's fun.
Yeah. Did you happen to, when you went back and rewatched it, did you happen to rewatch that crazy almost sack where he wrapped Glennon up, but Glennon kind of pitched it behind him to the running back and got out of it? Did you happen to watch that play a little bit?
I watched that. That might be the greatest play of Mike Glennon's career. Actually.
Well, it was the best play of his day, right? Like that, which is funny because he's just kind of like, hey, take the ball. Yeah. So if you watch that play, I'd love to see the all 22 of it. But in the angle that you have, Quinn's in the near part of the screen, and he comes off, and the tackle doesn't pay any attention to him. The tackle's going to take someone that's in front of him. The center runs over to try to take Quinn on the block and completely holds him, and he's like in the air, he's like parallel to the ground trying to like pull Quinn away. Clearly it's a hold, like it's clearly a hold, but doesn't get called. And so Quinn wraps him up, and I think that this is a reflection of not wanting to get a penalty.
Yeah,
right. So he wraps him up, and then Glennon does this little pitch because he doesn't hear the whistle. And I just thought, man, there it was. Like that was the one right there. He had another one that he was close on. There was one that was called back because Ogletree had a holding call. In the secondary. I think he would have gotten half a sack there. I'm not sure it would have got a full sack for him. But anyway, like he was around the quarterback all the time, which is amazing because they didn't drop back very much. The percentage of pressure that he was able to get on the number of dropbacks was astronomical. Like, I mean, Glennon had 11 pass attempts, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just unbelievable how few he had and how often Quinn was there. Like, he wanted that record clearly. So glad that he got it.
Real quick, there was someone on Twitter that mentioned to the site's account that they suggest that Quinn is getting all this in garbage time, and I'm like, this is not the case at all. The Bears have not had any teams in garbage time. The Bears offense has been so putrid that most teams just run the ball in the second half. There's no
Yes.
reason to keep throwing the ball. So, I haven't, actually crunched the numbers, but I would guess that most of Quinn's sacks were in the first half when the game was still relatively close, not an obvious passing situation where he can just tee off. Quinn is doing this, when on a horrible team with a horrible offense, when there is no reason for the opposition to play catch up. He has 18 sacks, and with that storm of events, it's just ridiculous.
Lester, I can actually jump in a little bit here if you want
go,
to.
Robert.
Crunch the numbers.
But so it's not a number cruncher as much as the really interesting part about Quinn's dominant season this season has been his pressure to sack conversion ratio. It's not sitting right in front of me, but somebody pointed this out as I was reviewing just last week. Quinn tends to get one, maybe 1.5 pressures. He's not getting 3, 4, 5 pressures a game and finally turning it into a sack. If you think about it, Quinn tends to get one shot at the quarterback and cashes in on it. Hey, credit to him. There's a skill there. And between the coverage unit that's behind him, his season, it's reflective of a defensive effort that I feel like has been maybe better than we expected, even if not good for him. You know what I mean?
Just wait till that Brian Dable offense is clicking next season in Chicago.
There you go. we had a couple things. We talked about that I think last week or the week before, where it was one of my stats where it was the pressure rate was amongst the worst in the league, but the sack rate was the number of sacks was amongst the highest. And then we actually did have somebody on Twitter, and I'm sorry that I forget the exchange and who did this, but they hit us up and they said, "Hey, I heard what you were saying. I kind of crunched the numbers. Most of his sacks are coming early." And so we actually already had that back and forth. It was a few weeks ago. And apologies to the person that did that. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there was someone who did go back and look at all that. So the idea that it's garbage time sacks is factually incorrect and kind of a dumb thing to say. But anyway, congratulations to Robert Quinn. We are very happy for you. Keep pushing that record up. We'd be excited if you can get a couple next week and make it an even 20. So I wanted to talk about Angelo Blackson. He got a sack and a safety. I thought he had a nice impact game. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the safety part later, but he's got 6.5 sacks on the year. He's no, that's wrong. That's Gipson. Sorry. Too many stats today. I don't know how many Blackson has, but he's been a nice piece.
Yeah, he has been.
And so I have 3 notes here. One of them is I also wanted to make sure we talked about Tonga with playing fullback.
That's something he did at BYU, if I remember correctly. That's a big body. He's like the fridge, the new version of the fridge, the freezer, whatever you want to call him. And that's for Bears fans. Bears fans love that stuff.
Well, I was going to ask you all right. So when we grew up, right, and watching football in the 80s and 90s, right, you had fullbacks. You don't carry a fullback anymore. Generally, there's a few in the league. There's a couple that get paid a lot, but in general, like, you don't have a lot of fullbacks on the roster. And this is a way to incorporate one of those like I formation lead backs without dedicating an entire roster spot to it. Do you think that that's a good idea? Like, to have a defensive lineman take a couple snaps a game as the fullback?
I mean, it's fun. It's fun to see. I mean, if he can do the job, if they're confident in him doing that, I think it can't hurt. You kind of see it through college football. Obviously, in high school, it happens all the time, and of course, the NFL. I mean, it really, like we talked about the fridge, it really got popularized back in the 80s. And then like every now and again, a team will do it. But a lot of times it's just like you said, the fullback's kind of a dying breed. So it's a nice way to get some more roster flexibility if a guy can do that for you.
He may have been the rookie, but he was no dumb cookie.
There you go.
The fridge. The easily my favorite line of the Super Bowl shuffle. So why don't we move on to Twitter? And what did you kind of pick out as something you wanted to highlight from Twitter this week?
For me, it's actually from the Chicago Bears official site. It was the 800 wins and counting. Here's to the next 800. But I thought it was kind of cool that in the graphic, Roquan Smith was front and center in that. I understand that it should be a guy that's prominent, from the now, but the fact that they picked Roquan, I think that says something nice about him. And then he's one of, I think, 3 middle linebackers, 4 linebackers in this graphic. Him, Buckus, Singletary, Urlacher. So, only one quarterback in the graphic.
Oh, who would that be?
Just Sid Luckman. But maybe the next time they do this graphic, it'll be Justin Fields front and center.
Yeah, maybe at 900 wins, we'll get Fields. So that's nice. I grabbed one from Seth Walder. He's an ESPN guy at Seth Walder. He says Mike Glennon recorded a QBR of 0.0 yesterday. However, Mike Glennon did not have enough plays to officially qualify, but if he had, it would have been the worst QBR game in the history of the metric, which they don't go negative. So that makes sense that it would have been the worst. And he says that the previous record was, or I guess it's still the record because he didn't qualify, 0.3 by Peyton Manning in week 10 of 2015 against the Chiefs. So how about that? For
2015. Wow, that's I never would have guessed Peyton Manning.
No, of course not, right?
Yeah,
that's not a record you think he hold. So here's the stat line for Glennon: 4 of 11 for 24 yards. He had 2 interceptions, probably could have been another one. 4 sacks taken for 34 yards lost. So for those of you that are good at math, that is -10 passing offensive yards. Absolutely terrible, right? And then he lost 2 fumbles. This is stunning how bad of a performance this is from a professional quarterback who has made life-changing money in this league.
This guy was signed by the Bears. Obviously, the story's out there. Everyone knows the story. And, I always thought it was the Pace is trying to make a smokescreen, but even Glennon's always been just a bad quarterback. And it's like, but there were some people that really thought, oh yeah, there's no way they want a quarterback because they have Mike Glennon now. And I never bought that because, he was always going to be just a placeholder anyway. It was just I can't believe Mike Glennon is still in the league just cashing checks.
I think that when I look back at how I reacted to that in the moment, my thinking was that Ryan Pace didn't like that quarterback class.
Yeah.
And was trying to have a placeholder. I didn't think it was a smart thing because they already had Brian Hoyer in the building. There's your placeholder for cheap. So why are you going out and getting this guy as a placeholder? None of it really made sense. There was a lot of cognitive dissonance with that. Was the start of my, what is this general manager doing? And it just kind of has gone downhill from there in a lot of ways. But yeah, that's my relationship with Ryan Pace, and Mike Glennon figures prominently in that. So terrible game, but at least the Bears are starting to recoup some of that money that they spent on him. So I have a really fun stat this week, but what do you have?
For me, my stat of the week is the number 7.
Okay.
And it actually has two ways I'm going to go here. One, Tevin Jenkins only played 7 offensive snaps in the entire game. And secondly, Thomas Graham Jr. only played 7% of the defensive snaps in the game. I just don't understand. I understand a veteran should not lose a job to injury, but the Bears are going nowhere. And it's not like Tevin Jenkins and Thomas Graham Jr. did not play good football. It's not like this is the Jason Peters from the Eagles when he was a perennial Pro Bowler. This is Jason Peters at the end of his run. He's okay, but the last game Jenkins started and finished, the only game he started and finished, he was phenomenal for a rookie. He was phenomenal for a veteran. He deserved to be starting. And then with Graham Jr., again, he started the one game, did great, played a bit of a rotation in the second game. And then where is he? Why are you rewarding Artie Burns with those outside corner reps? It makes no sense to me that those two guys could not get on the field more.
And wouldn't that be nice to gain some confidence in going into the offseason by playing a bad team where you're probably going to roll them,
Yeah.
right? Where you're going to, maybe Thomas Grant's going to have an opportunity to get his hands on a ball, right? Maybe Jenkins is going to have a chance to just bury some people. Why not give them that opportunity? The answer is that Matt Nagy doesn't care. He
Yeah.
doesn't care about the future of this team. Matt Nagy cares about trying to squeeze out another win or two. And I think what's funny is, in his mind, obviously total projection from my part. In his mind, he thinks like Andy Dalton's the guy that gives me that best chance. Is he? Because boy, that was a tough game for me.
It was rough.
So, all right. So my number is 62.
Nice.
That is the number of safeties that the Bears have recorded in their history.
Did you count them all up, or is there a way
I did. I went out and found them.
That's a lot of safeties.
Over 101 years. Right? So it's a rare event, and they're fun. Safeties are great. It has its own little fun move, right? Right? And you can do a little dance with it. I love safeties. I wish that they were more prevalent. I wish that they got 4 points for them, right? Because they're so rare. You should get more points than 2 for a safety. But Angelo Blackson had the safety, took down Devontae Booker. Great. Here's some fun, okay? Here's some Bears history fun. I went back and I figured out who recorded these safeties. You're going to love these names. Before I do, are there any safeties in Bears history that you remember off the top of your head?
Henry Wachter in the Super Bowl. That's the one that stands out. Wow, that's a good one. I'm curious who the number one guy is in Bears history.
Okay. You gonna take a guess?
Would it be Steve McMichael?
Excellent. All right, so we're gonna go through this. So again, only 62. A lot of these are punts. A punter, took it out of the back of the end zone, or just ran out. So some guys don't. There's no credit on some of them, but the names that pop up on getting credit for some of these safeties, it's a who's who. It's beautiful. I love this list. All right, so starting back at the beginning, Hall of Famer George Musso has a safety. Hall of Famer Joe Stidehar has a safety. Blocked punt out of the back of the end zone. Hall of Famer Ed Sprinkle. Hall of Famer
guy.
Doug Atkins.
Nice.
Your guy. So my guy and your guy.
Nice.
Hall of Famer Dick Butkus. Hall of Famer Alan Page. Hall of Famer Dan Hampton. 7 Bears Hall of Famers have recorded a safety. Here's some other names. Ed Obradovich. Doug Plank. Everybody loves Doug Plank. Jim Osborne, a forgotten defensive lineman. He retired right before the 85 season. Otis, Mama's Boy Wilson. Steve McMichael has 3 safeties in his history. He leads the team.
I knew it. Like an error. Nice.
Excellent. So 2 more modern players have 2 each. Any guess on one of those?
From the current team?
They're not on the current team.
But
one guy's out of the league, would have been a Lovey guy, and another guy is currently in the league but not on the team. I'm really pushing that guess.
Would Alex Brown be among the leaders up there?
Alex Brown's counterpart.
Adewale
Ogunleye has 2. And then Leonard Floyd has 2.
Okay.
And then current Bears, Eddie Goldman and Khalil Mack. They have 1 each. And then your guy, Wachter.
Yeah.
He has 2.
Okay.
So some interesting names on that list. Okay, I'm sorry. I found this fascinating. I got to share it. So 2 safeties in the same game, one in 1969 against Pittsburgh, and then 2 safeties in the same game back in 1927. You remember this game, of course, Lester. It was against the Pottsville Maroons.
The Maroons. My second favorite team.
Here are some players that have suffered a safety at the hands of the Bears. And I'm sorry, you guys that don't like history, but I had too much fun with this. Mule Wilson. That's a real person that lived and played football. Sammy Baugh took a safety, had his punt blocked because Sammy Baugh did it all. Gentleman by the name of Vitamin T. Smith.
Vitamin T.
Taken down by Ed Sprinkle. Y.A. Tittle, suffered 2 safeties at the hands of the Bears. Hall of Famer Fran Tarkington, Archie Manning, Steve Grogan, of course, in the Super Bowl, Magic Man, Don Mikowski, Chris Chandler, Dan Marino. So that's a fun one. Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, young Aaron Rodgers, 2009 Aaron Rodgers, Donovan McNabb, Jared Goff, Sam Bradford, Blaine Gabbert, okay, and then Deshaun Watson. So fun list of names that have in the safety history of the Bears. Found it fascinating. 62 safeties in team history that they've been able to put on the Bears side of the board.
Those names back from the old days, Mule, Vitamin T, those are great names back then.
Vitamin T? That's
Vitamin
my first
T.
run across of
I never
Vitamin
heard
T.
that one.
That's great. We need to bring that back for somebody. Vitamin T needs to be a nickname that is in the league somewhere. Maybe that's Trevis. Maybe Trevis Gipson should be
Vitamin Tonga.
T.
It's right there.
Oh,
that's
Tonga.
not bad.
Tonga, Vitamin T. All right. That's my number of the week, 62. I had way too much fun with that. We'll take a quick break, and on the other side of it, we'll get into everybody's favorite segment, the Three Bears. All right, Lester. So let's get into the Three Bears. So hot bowl of porridge, a lot of really fun performances from yesterday, but who did you identify as the hot bowl of porridge?
Like you said, there were a lot of names we could have went with. I'm going to go Trevis Gipson. I have a feeling that's your guy too. 3 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. He's becoming a pretty reliable guy off the edge here. And next year when Khalil Mack returns, I think the Bears are going to be really comfortable having Gipson as the third wheel there, because the last couple of years they've got out and got veterans, trying to fill that spot. But here's another guy that Ryan Pace moved up in the draft for. Looks like he's going to pan out. I mean, he may never become a top tier starter for you, but what he is now, I think he said 6.5 sacks he has right now.
6.5.
And then in his press conference, I found out that he's a big fan of Marvel Comics, and his sack celebration is the mighty Thor, the Thor's hammer.
Thor's hammer.
Okay. I had no idea that's what he was doing. I thought it was baseball at the time, but it's that's Thor's hammer. That's what he's doing there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was giving mine to the Gibsons because Tayshaun had an interception and Trevis had 2 sacks and 2 forced fumbles, which is a monster game, right? And he's coming on. He's getting a lot of snaps. I think he's snap count. I think he's around like the 50% mark. So he's getting some looks. Am I right?
No, I think this week he was again outpaced by Bruce Irvin, who was getting more reps out there.
Okay.
I don't understand it, but
well, I was listening to Joniak, and I thought that he said that he was getting about half the snaps.
Oh, he is about half the snaps.
Okay.
But just the whole Bruce Irvin love.
Yeah, the Bruce Irvin thing doesn't make.
I don't want to see Bruce Irvin. I want to see Gipson out there.
Yeah, and Bruce Irvin already got his revenge game captainship, so why are we still playing him? Yes, Gibsons. We need more Gibsons. Are there any more Gibsons that we can get on this team? Because they're, they've been coming on. They've been playing well here. So we'll take all the Gibsons. Cold bowl of porridge. Who'd you identify for this?
I'm going to go a different direction. I usually always go play here, but I have to point out that the CBS broadcast team, that the whole network, of all the networks that have football, to me, I think CBS is the most unpleasant production. The camera angle I'm not a fan of. The lack of instant replays. There were some nice runs by Montgomery with some real nice push from the O-line that I wanted to replay. I never got it. It's like, what are they doing? And then, of course, Spiro Didis or Dedis, I'm not sure I pronounce his name. I looked it up, but I found 2 different pronunciations. But Jay Feely and him, unprepared. The whole game, names wrong. Name wrong happens. But they were talking about Matt Nagy like it's not a foregone conclusion he's gone. Like, they were talking about Matt Nagy, like, what he has to do next year with Fields. It's like, what are you talking about? And of course they mentioned Andy Dalton being brought in to mentor Fields. It's like, what are you talking? He was the QB1. What are you guys doing here? I know as Bears fans, we're more critical of when these guys that are national screw things up, but it's like, do a little homework, just a little homework.
Yeah, you've got, so CBS is the AFC. They do predominantly AFC games, right? So they get a few NFC games every year. This is one of the NFC games that Fox let them have, which makes sense that they would let them have this one. They put one of their lowest ranked announcer teams on it because it's between two bad teams. And it's week 17, right? So these guys are probably running on fumes, but it's still your job, right? Like, they probably could call a somewhat accurate game with the Texans versus the Jags, right?
Yeah.
That's probably the game that they get a lot, and I'm sure that they could know a little bit more. Two teams they don't know very well, and they're coming at the end of the year, and they're coming in. They're not real. No, they had no chance.
I mean,
And that's
like with the names is one thing. I mean, I think they
Right.
called David Montgomery Daniel Montgomery.
yes.
But what? How do you not know that Matt Nagy is as good as gone? And you're talking about things like, is he the guy to lead Justin Fields? Is he the guy? He's the guy who's going to be on. He's gone in a week. Why is this even a storyline that they're even talking about?
I think that this goes back to something we've talked about before, which is the multiple options for commentary,
yeah.
because there's no way that we should be subjected to this type of commentary. Not just football fans, right? It's just that was an uninformed bad effort, right? So if you have a different option for commentary for a different audio version of that game, it's going to enhance your experience. And I mean, I'm not giving them a pass because clearly they did a bad job, but there are some factors that they're faking it, right? And if you know the real answer, you can tell that they're faking it, and that's what that was.
I mean, is this is their full-time job? I'm
It's their
assuming.
full-time
This is
job,
not like
but
a
they're
part-time
AFC
gig.
guys, and they're
Yeah.
they're at the bottom, right? I mean, and look, Jay Feely seems like a nice guy. That was the color guy.
He was former Bear, Jay Feely,
Sure. What position though?
kicker.
Maybe we don't have kickers be the color guys.
He seemed to talk a lot about the kicking weather and the footing and stuff. I mean, I understand that's his gig. He's a former kicker, but is that really all he adds to broadcast? This is kicking expertise. That's a
I
really
think the
small
answer is
portion.
yes.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And that's why you shouldn't have a kicker be the color guy. And I don't want to offend any kickers out there. I'm sure that there are some kickers that understand the nuances of, the running cover 3, right? Like, but probably not, right? They kind of, the specialists kind of do their own thing. I haven't been very impressed with him. So my cold bowl porridge, I love yours. I love going after announcers when they're bad, and we need to fix the announcing game. Cold bowl porridge to me is Andy Dalton, and I'm sorry, but like calling out anybody on a 29-3 victory, I get it. Like you're being nitpicky. 18 of 35, he's barely over 50%, 173 yards, which is less than 10 yards of completion. 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Could have been 3 interceptions, could have been 4. Like he had some turnover worthy throws. It was like he was, Bradbury, I want to make sure I pad your stats. Like, get one of these, right? Like, it was crazy. In the end zone, he threw that right at the defender. I still need to kind of go back and look at how that was incomplete. Thought he had that. This is not great audition tape for him. Andy Dalton wants another contract. There's a 1-year deal for him. He wants to be able to go out. He wants to earn another starting job somewhere else. He wants to be able to at least get backup money or compete money, right? Like this is someone who wants to extend his career. It's bad audition tape against a bad football team. The score's fine, but this is, just about anybody could have won that game. Mike Glennon won the game for the Bears. Like that's the story of this game. I don't know, man. Like he was the better Ginger quarterback in this one, but it's not saying much.
Especially after how nice Foles looked last week.
Yeah.
I knew they were never going to stick with Foles if there was an injury to Fields. I knew they'd go back to Dalton once he was ready. But at this point in the season, I can't believe I'm going to say this. Why not ride the hot hand and let Nick Foles get the start? I think that's just the way Matt Nagy should have went. But then it goes back to, is there some friction between Foles and Nagy? That's been reported. It's possible. Andy Dalton does make the, well, actually, does he make more money than? I'm not even sure. The contracts are so ridiculous as it is. So, I actually had Dalton as my cold at first. And then the more I was getting tweeted at about people making excuses for the stupid ass CBS crew. I'm like, I'm going to go CBS crew. I'm going to talk about
Here I was
man.
trying to defend them.
Yeah,
I'm not even trying to defend them. I'm just saying, like, I can understand why they were as bad as they were, because they're not very good anyway. They're at the bottom of the pecking order for CBS, right? Those are the guys that you cut. CBS cut them. Like,
but that's how you go up the ladder. You know, like, man,
they're not going up the
that
ladder.
Jay Feely's doing great. Let's move him up. But instead, it's going to be in a couple years. Jay Feely is going to be doing ESPN de Ocho at some high school game, probably. So I don't know.
Talking about the footing for the kicker, and what, you know, he was hitting 28 yarders in pregame. This high school kicker, right?
The punt, pass, kick competition. He may be doing that next.
Now you're talking. That takes me back.
There you go.
Get the old arm loosened up. See if I still got it. All right. What about the just right? Who'd you have for that?
For my just right, I'm going to go with wide receiver Darnell Mooney. 7 catches, 69 yards, 1 touchdown. There's a lot of talk about him not being a true number one. And I get that. You know, he's 5'11", 175-ish. But he's the last few weeks have shown something. I mean, he had a really tough run last week. You know, there's some toughness to his game. I think he has to get a little stronger physically. You know, but there's been plenty of receivers in the NFL that have started not as strong as they are, end up in their career. A guy like Mooney, you know, his first 2 seasons have been really good for Chicago. Maybe he can be number one. I still have my doubts, but you know, the connection he has with Fields is real. If Fields is going to be the guy going forward, like we all hope he is, you know, that could be his guy, his go-to guy. And yes, he's not the best with the go up and get it catches. You know, that's not his forte, but you know, you scheme him open. You know, he's a good route runner. You know, he has great speed. Another good year with the weights. You know, maybe he can be he'll never be an A+ number one guy, but he could be a guy you really can count on going forward.
Yeah, Mooney's mine as well. And I think that did you watch that Chiefs Bengals game by any chance, or
No,
at least catch part of it?
I caught the highlights, obviously.
So you watch the Chiefs, and obviously they have this all-world tight end, and they have this unbelievably fast and dynamic wide receiver, and then they usually have like a third guy that can get, you know, soak up a little bit of targets. But they got these like 2 amazing guys, and then you look at the Bengals now, right? So Jamar Chase has just he had a ridiculous game, right? Yeah. But he's looked really good, and he's come on strong. T. Higgins, who had, you know, kind of a, you know, disappointing rookie season, he has looked really good. And then Tyler Boyd's a really solid third option, right? So that offense now has their trigger man with Burrow, and they've got 3 really good wide receiving options, right? Mooney can be one of those guys. And you could say, well, he's probably more of a Tyler Boyd than he is T. Higgins or Jamar Chase. Yeah, I mean, just from a size standpoint, sure. But you need 3 guys, or you need at least 2 amazing guys, right? I think you need 3 guys. You got one of them. Great. Go out and get 2 more, right? That's the point, is you're going to need to build off of that. Mooney absolutely can be a piece of the future, and he, you know, he's performing where you want him to with whoever you've put out there. 3 different quarterbacks throwing him the ball. He's looked pretty good with all of them, right? So it's only going to be one in the future. It's going to be number 1. And I think he can be one of those guys. I thought at first I was going to give the just right to Montgomery, and I went back and looked at his stats, and they were terrible. And I think one of his longer runs got called back. Yeah. And then he had a lot, like the short yardage carries for the touchdowns, but they were short yardage. And then he had a lot of like kind of grind it, running it, you know, banging in the line. At the end of the day, it was like 2.9 yards a carry. And I was like, I can't give him a just right for 2.9 yards a carry.
And don't forget about the interception either. That was
well, let's call that on the being too cute on the play call. But you know, he's not Tariq Cohen. He doesn't have the arm of Tariq Cohen.
Speaking of Tariq Cohen, he may be one of your guys next year as a receiver, if that's what the new GM decides. If there's a new GM, which is still, you know, up for debate here, it's, you know, but whoever the GM is, you got to bring. You figure you're going to draft a guy at receiver, you got to throw some money at a free agent at some point, and then maybe a reclamation type project. I know Robert Schmitz has been talking about a guy on Twitter for the Jets. I think he's a former Baylor Bear. Denzel Mims. So I think, you know, a guy like that possibly comes in, and you know, you got to revamp the entire receiving corps, because next year it's just Mooney. So,
Yeah, and we can get into that in the offseason, but it's a good idea to build your receiving core like a basketball team where
Yep.
you have different skill sets that complement each other. This idea of bringing in all these speedsters is interesting. Let's just say that, especially when the scheme doesn't fit. Generally, when you go out and build a wide receiving core, you're gonna want some size, and you're gonna want some speed. You're gonna want precise route runners that can move the sticks, things like that. And so they're gonna have a blank slate. I mean, at least there's that, right? You got Mooney and the rest of the room to build. Trying to look at it in the positive light, you have you have a blank sheet of paper with one name on it. So, um, nothing for Fields report, obviously, because he didn't play, but it sounds like he's likely to be back for the finale. So we will, revisit that and we will look forward to that. Did you hear the Bears play the Vikings next week? Did you hear what Mike Zimmer said
Yes.
about their rookie quarterback?
That was outstanding. I actually tweeted that out because it happened last night. I couldn't believe when he said it. So I tweeted it out, and he's not fond of Kellen Mond.
So obviously, Mike Zimmer is almost certainly going to get fired as well. I think Zimmer's time is done in Minnesota. So Nagy and Zimmer can, have a pregame conversation about what they're going to do, for next year. But Zimmer was asked in the press conference if he had any interest in getting Mond to start, Kellen Mond to start next week, and he says not particularly. And the guys will follow up like, well, why not? Or give me more. And he's like, I see him every day. And it was just this like implied like, I see him every day. He's terrible. I'm not going to put him out there in an NFL game to be the starter. And they rushed back Sean Mannion to start in place of Kirk Cousins, who was out on the COVID list, the most predictable thing that's happened this NFL season. And Mannion had been out, and they rushed him back to start. And so he's not a fan of Kellen Mond, which who knows? Maybe he becomes a thing, and we'll all be have an egg on our face, but it's just kind of good when you see the rivals not be super excited about what's waiting in the wings.
It was funny because I read the quote first, and then of course I wanted to see it just to see exactly the context behind it, and it's exactly what you said. That's exactly the vibe I got was, I see him every day. What's the point? It was hilarious. Good stuff though.
As the kids say, he gives 0 Fs. At this point, it was fantastic. Robert, I kept that PG for you. I don't want you to have to beat me. Let's it's a Bears win. It felt a lot more like a Giants loss in a lot of ways, but give the Bears credit. The defense looked good. They were opportunistic. They took advantage of the Ginger Giraffe and took him down and made him look ridiculous, which was a lot of fun, particularly fun for Bears fans because of all that money Ryan Pace gave him. And some fun stuff on offense with Darnell Mooney. Not much else to say though, right? We got one more of these things coming back to you next week with the Vikings report to close out the year. Might have some final thoughts on what's going on with that. But anything else going on this week?
It's funny if the Bears win, then the Bears and Vikings are the Spider-Man meme that you predicted they were all this whole year. Finally, it's going to happen. I think the Vikings, I saw they already are clinched second place, but it's by like the 4th tiebreaker if the Bears do happen to pull out the W. But that'd be a nice way to close out the season. 7-10. Get these young players a nice feeling going into next year, and hopefully it's with Justin Fields at quarterback.
Yeah, I think you would just say they're tied for second because you don't get anything for second place in the division, and you're not going to the playoffs. Yeah. So it's tied for second. The tiebreaker thing that goes to like the 4th tiebreaker, not a thing. But they will have the same, if the Bears win, they would have the same division record. They'd have the same conference record. They seem to have the same common opponents record, right? Like this is the same team. They were the same team last year. That it was the most bizarre thing last year. If the Bears won in week 1, the Vikings lost, and vice versa the entire year. Whenever the Vikings would win in a week, the Bears would lose, and whenever the Bears would win in a week, the Vikings would do the opposite every single week. And you think, how's that possible? Bye weeks was the only difference, and that's how the Vikings were 7-9 and the Bears were 8-8. It was a weird year. They're the same team. They're going through a lot of the same things. The difference is, of course, the Bears have their what they believe to be their future quarterback. The Vikings do not. They have an overpaid not good enough quarterback under center that they have to figure out what to do. So the Bears are in a better situation than the Minnesota Vikings. So
Definitely.
we'll get to see them next week.
Both teams are going to be starting with a rebuild. The Bears are definitely a much more attractive location. I think the Bears are one of the top locations just because of Fields.
Just because of Fields.
And then it's, that's a lot of national analysts, they still point to Chicago as being a big market. And I know a lot of Bears fans think, who cares? That matters. I mean, the legacy that some of these guys can create in Chicago, that matters to them. And I think the Bears are going to, again, it's still George making the call, George McCaskey. So we'll have to see what happens. But, if they get the right guy in place, who knows?
Man, all right. I'm ready for the off season.
Yes,
we got one
for
more of
sure.
these things. We'll try to find some silver lining for you guys next week. Regardless of what happens, we'll keep it balanced. Check our stuff out on the website. We write articles, and check it out on YouTube if you aren't already. If you are, like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. Till next time, bear down.